For most people, going home feels comforting. For me, it felt terrifying. In 2016, I packed up my life in Germany and boarded a plane back to the United States. I was 36 years old, and once again, I was starting over. Germany was never just a temporary stop for me. It was home. I had spent years building a life there. I had routines, I had friends, I had a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. But even with all of that, I knew something in my life was shifting. And to understand why I left, I have to take you back a little. Before Germany, I served 8 years in the United States Army. Like a lot of people who leave the military, I struggled with the transition to civilian life. The Army gave me structure, purpose, and a clear mission. When that ended, I found myself asking a question I didn't really know how to answer. What am I supposed to do now? That feeling can be hard to explain to people who haven't lived it. When you've spent years moving with purpose, following orders, and being part of something bigger than yourself, civilian life can feel quiet in a way that is almost uncomfortable. So instead of standing still, I kept moving. I went back overseas and worked as a civilian contractor in Iraq and Afghanistan. Most people spend their lives trying to get away from war zones. I went back. And I think at the time, part of me was still chasing the feeling of having a mission. I was chasing structure. I was chasing something familiar. I was chasing the version of myself that knew how to survive by staying busy. That work changed me. It was demanding, it was dangerous, it was stressful. But it also taught me a lot about who I was under pressure. It showed me how strong I could be even when I didn't feel strong at all. Still, after a while, I knew I couldn't stay there forever. So Germany became the next chapter. From 2012 to 2016, Germany was home. And I really do mean home. I built a life there. I settled into routines. I made friends. I experienced a different pace of life. I got to see the world in a new way, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. And if you've ever had a season in life where things finally feel stable, you know how precious that can be. But even in that season, I had this feeling I couldn't shake. It was like my life was waiting for me somewhere else. Have you ever had that feeling? Like everything looks fine from the outside, but deep down, you know a chapter is ending? That was me. I didn't have a dramatic moment where everything suddenly made sense. I didn't wake up one day with a perfect plan. I just knew I was being called to move again. So I made the decision to leave Germany and return to the United States. And I'll be honest, that was not an easy decision. A lot of people didn't understand it. From the outside, it probably looked like I was giving up something good. But when you're the one living the life, you know there are things other people can't see. You know when your spirit is tired. You know when you're holding things together longer than you should. You know when staying in one place is no longer helping you grow. That's where I was. I returned to the United States with a lot of uncertainty and not nearly enough answers. I didn't know exactly what would come next. I didn't have a perfect plan. I just had faith that if I kept going, I could build something meaningful. When I landed in Maryland, I wasn't the same person who had left America years before. The Army had changed me. Iraq had changed me. Afghanistan had changed me. Germany had changed me. Every place I lived left something on me. Every season taught me something. And even though I didn't fully understand it at the time, I was becoming the woman I needed to be for the next part of my life. Eventually, I settled in Northern Virginia, and I had no idea that this move would change everything. I didn't know I would build a career I loved. I didn't know I would become a mother. I didn't know I would face some of the hardest moments of my life. And I definitely didn't know how many times I would have to reinvent myself after that. But that's the thing about starting over. When you're in it, starting over can feel like failure. It can feel like you're behind. It can feel like everyone else has it figured out while you're still trying to find your footing. But years later, I've learned something different. Sometimes starting over is not the end of the story. Sometimes it's the beginning of the life you were supposed to have all along. And if I'm being honest, that lesson matters even more to me now than it did back then, because I understand what it means to carry the weight of responsibility while still trying to build a future. I understand what it means to want stability. I understand what it means to want a life that doesn't keep forcing you to begin again. And I understand what it means to want better, not just for yourself, but for your child. That's part of why I'm telling this story, because life after active duty is not always simple. Sometimes it looks like moving from one place to another. Sometimes it looks like trying to find your identity after structure disappears. Sometimes it looks like doing your best while carrying fear, exhaustion, and hope all at the same time. And sometimes it looks like learning that survival is not the same thing as peace. The years after the military taught me a lot about strength. But they also taught me that strength alone is not the same as stability. That was a hard lesson, because for a long time, I thought if I just kept moving, kept working, and kept pushing, everything would eventually settle. But life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes the thing you need most is not another move. Sometimes it's rest. Sometimes it's consistency. Sometimes it's a chance to build a life that doesn't constantly ask you to start over. And that's where I am now, trying to build something steady, something meaningful, and something that allows me to be present in the life of my child while still honoring everything I've lived through. I'm sharing this because I know I'm not the only one who has felt burned out, displaced, or exhausted from always having to adjust. I know I'm not the only one who has looked at her life and thought, I just need one season to stay still. And I know I'm not the only one who has tried to hold on to hope while carrying the pressure of responsibility. So if you're in a season of starting over, I want you to know this. You are not failing. You are not behind. And you are not the only one trying to rebuild a life that feels safe. Sometimes the path to peace is messy. Sometimes it takes years to understand why certain doors closed. And sometimes the life you're trying to build only starts to make sense after you've already walked through the hardest part. For me, leaving Germany was one of those moments. It was the end of one chapter, but it was also the beginning of something I couldn't fully see yet. And in the next episode, I want to share more about what life after active duty really felt like for me. The pressure, the uncertainty, and the battle of figuring out who I was once the uniform was gone. Because the hardest part was never just leaving. The hardest part was learning how to become myself again. That's where this story really begins.